Good day, campers! Welcome back to the long-awaited first episode of Two Maesters in the year 2024. That's right, baby, we're in the future because you're probably watching all of our videos from last year and this is the first one of 2024. And boy, are we excited. How are you feeling about 2024, Josh?
Very excited. I think there's so many different things coming out this year. Last year was a bit of a lull because of the writer's strike, and it feels like everything's opening up again. So you've got like June that's coming out this year, and then
Fallout TV show,
which will be amazing. And I think it's more diverse because like there's less Marvel stuff out this year, so it's more time to then watch other stuff that comes out this year.
Yeah, that's right. Fuck you, Marvel. Your time's over, mate. Everyone's bored of Marvel now. The superhero fatigue has perhaps led to other things. But we're not here to talk about superheroes. We're here to talk about everyone's favorite, Indiana Jones. Like, what an iconic franchise. Something I think a lot of us grew up watching as we were kids. And personally, like, something about Indiana Jones that makes it so iconic that we'll dig into a bit later. But let's start off. What comes to mind when you hear Indiana Jones, Josh?
When I hear Indiana Jones, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is adventure.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think I really love about the films is that it takes place all over the globe, especially like Raiders of the Lost Ark, the amount of different places that they go to. And they continue that through the rest of the series, and you get to just go on this wonderful adventure like with Indiana Jones, and then also just with the rest of the cast, so they go from scene to scene. And I think another thing that really does come out with Indiana Jones is like, I think it's like bringing in nostalgia, because like when you watch Indiana Jones film, it's not like even the modern ones, they haven't tried to like tailor it to, okay, now that people are older, we now need to make it a little bit more darker, needs to be reaching like a film age or similar to films now that if you see a film, like say a Star Wars film in the 70s and the 80s, you kind of see with the prequels, it's kind of like there's more action, there's more violence, and also the tones changed a bit. But I think one thing that you can see with Indiana Jones is kind of stayed the same.
Yeah, it stayed true to its roots. Although there's some stuff we'll dig into there that definitely you're going to find may challenge that point of view of yours. We'll see. So let's start off with the wonderful what of Indiana Jones. What is Indiana Jones? Really, I should really title the section as what does Wikipedia say what Indiana Jones is? So this is what Wikipedia says. Indiana Jones is an American media franchise consisting of 5 films and a prequel television series along with games, comics, and tie-in novels that depict the adventures of Dr. Henry Walton Indiana Jones Jr., portrayed in all the films by Harrison Ford. He's a fictional professor of archaeology. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
One thing I would add that probably might be in your notes is the fact that it's also kind of like Spielberg's take on an adventurous James Bond.
Yeah, it's in my notes. God damn it. Well, I did send these notes to you beforehand, so maybe you knew that, and this is like doing a plant.
Yeah.
The audience thinks this is natural, but I think it is natural, just FYI, audience. So let's talk about the movies and adaptations, just so we've got a rough idea of like when these all came out. So Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981, i.e. the first Indiana Jones movie. Temple of Doom came out in 1984. The Last Crusade came out in 1989. Then there was a really big lull between The Last Crusade and then eventually The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which came out in 2008. And then recently, The Dial of Destiny in 2023. There's also lots of other adaptations as well. So let's not forget there was the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles TV show that was 1992 to 1993, as well as a game that will be coming out soon. And we're doing this podcast on the 20th of January. 2 days ago, they literally showed the first trailer for the Indiana Jones game. And you know what? It looked okay. You know, come on. Games adaptations of movies, I always have my reserved thoughts
A pinch
about.
of salt always. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how it goes. It might be different because it's more expanded. So just out of curiosity, of all those movies I mentioned for the Indiana Jones movies, which one is your favourite and why?
I would have to say Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Why?
The reason I love that the most, I think it's because the nostalgia of me watching it when I was really young. Even I think I watched it maybe on BBC over Christmas. You know, when BBC used to have like, which they probably still do now, like Christmas films that they just show throughout the day. So I was able to watch it on the BBC, and I think it was just like how much it stood out from all the other films I'd watched, and it was actually the first Indiana Jones film. Like for some people, they've watched. The one about the Last Crusade, they've watched that one, or the Temple of Doom. But I think I've watched all of them apart from the present one. But I think there's just something about the Raiders of the Lost Ark that made it so special to me. And I think it's really just the storyline's perfect.
Yeah. It's not too dark as well. And this is something we'll dig into with Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom is regarded as maybe a bit of like too much of a dark turn for the series, and we'll dig into that a bit when we talk about the production history of the show. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's such a classic action adventure. You know, there's literally scenes where he flies around, when he's going to different destinations, they have the map, they're showing a ... traveling across, and it's like, yay, adventure, you know. It's like why people like playing games like Uncharted, etc. It's the exoticism of the locations, the sense of adventure, the bloody catchy soundtrack, which from the very start was
John Williams,
brilliant.
at it again. Yes.
Oh, John Williams. We need John Williams, Hans Zimmer, and Bear McCreary, who does a lot of other really cool soundtracks. We need them all in a room, and they'll create like the sound of God. It's amazing. I will agree with you that Raiders of the Lost Ark is also my favourite one. I don't know what it is. Maybe it had the benefit of no comparison, but some franchises, they start off, the first one is the best and it just goes downhill from there, or it never really adds up to it. Whilst maybe some, the first one's good, but then the second one, they really come into their own and more confident. So think of Batman Begins versus The Dark Knight. Like Batman Begins was great, but The Dark Knight was like Oscar worthy.
Yeah, and like another one with George Lucas is like Empire Strikes Back. It's like you had Star Wars, and then Empire Strikes Back was like, you know, we're confident in the storyline. Now we're going to hit out the park. We're going to show you like the how big the Star Wars universe is. We're actually going to fully show you how dark the dark side is, and the fact that throughout the whole film you kind of see that it's put in a way that people think, oh, they're going to win in the end anyway. It's that type of film. But I think it was one of the big like fantasy films where the bad guys end up winning. And I think that was probably like a huge shock for people who went to see it in cinema.
Yeah, I guess so, because people are used to like happy endings, because it's, for example, it's difficult to make movies about mental health disorders because it's too real for people, and people want to see something that's like takes them away from reality sometimes. Although some people also do really appreciate cinema that teaches them something, you know, and makes them think differently. But a lot of the time people go to the movies to forget about what's going on in the real world. And I guess that's part of Indiana Jones, you know, just the locations, the sense of adventure of that. So cool.
But just quickly, I think another thing to your point is that if the director and also the actors think that's the only film, I think that's sometimes when the first film is so good and the others can't keep up. Because someone said, like a really good example with Rush Hour, the film with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, that they said, oh, we're only going to make one film. So Jackie Chan, the director, the stars, Chris Tucker, put everything into that film because they were told there wouldn't be a second. So when a second came out, it's like, okay, we've put everything into this. It won't shape up to that. So maybe that's the same thing with Indiana Jones potentially, that he thought that this is the only way I can get a second film is if the first is amazing.
Yeah.
But then like with modern franchises, it's like, okay, we've got 4 films. This is the first, this is the second, that's the third, that's the fourth. So then it makes it harder because like if you've already planned for that this is going to be a film series, it's going to have 3 or 4 films after it. It's like, well, I can't put everything into the first film because then what will I have for the second, third, and fourth?
Exactly, and there's no long-term plot goals.
Yeah.
So you can see where, like, for example, in Star Wars, you can see they just made it up as they went along.
Yeah.
Even, like, 4, 5, and 6, which everyone's like, it's amazing, it's sacred, and it's like, there's plot holes within that. Even if you exclude the prequel and then the post-sequels, there's still plot holes in it. Indiana Jones, I don't know that much. I haven't really thought about it that much because I haven't actually watched them since I watched Kingdom of Crystal Skull when I was, well, that's 2008. God, I must have been, 13. Oh, gross. Spotty teenager. I've got a great story to tell about that.
Okay.
So I first saw Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for a friend's 13th or 12th birthday party, depending exactly on the time of the year. We went to the cinema to watch it. First time watching it. It's like a kid's birthday party, borderline teenagers. We sit down. The movie starts, but something's not quite right, and by accident, the cinemas accidentally put on Sex and the City. And like, bearing in mind, we're like probably the oldest kids there. There's tons of parents and way younger kids. Because Indiana Jones is family fun, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the first 10 minutes of Sex and the City? You get straight into it. Like, the character Samantha is straight away banging some guy. It's so good. And then after 10 minutes, they realised their mistake, came in and apologised to everyone and gave out refunds and then put Indiana Jones on. But I will never forget that. Some children had their childhoods abruptly ruined there. I mean, I was at an age where I started thinking about that stuff anyway, so it wasn't so bad for me, but that's just brilliant. What would you say is your least favourite out of all these Indiana Jones movies?
I would say the Crystal Skull.
Why?
I think for me it's just like the alien aspect of it. Because you had like in the first film, you had like the Ark of the Covenant and you saw at the end how powerful it was. So I was like, okay, then are they linking towards religion? And especially like when, what's his name again? Sean Connery's character drinks from the Holy Grail and then doesn't die because he's drunk. So then I'm like, okay, then, so are they leaning towards religious relics? And then all of a sudden it's like, bam, aliens. like everything explained because it's like aliens. Like, I was like, yeah, but like, how can they both fit in the same universe?
Yeah, I think this is like, I was thinking about, because one of the questions I had was waiting for later, but I guess we could ask now is like, what are the sort of iconic things of Indiana Jones that make it so popular? We've already said the sense of adventure, exotic locations, the soundtrack. But also one thing we didn't mention is the cool references to mythology. Yeah. And as you say, like, it's folkloric or religious myths, but then the aliens is just like, bam. Yeah. But is that not maybe a modern myth? But even though aliens are most likely to be real, and I argue they did visit the planet Earth.
But I think the issue is, like, it was not
out of character.
It was like it wasn't hinted throughout the whole film. Like, it was like, okay, bam, we found the Crystal Skull. Actually, it's a skull that belongs to an alien who now, I think if I remember it correctly, then come back to life and then leaves the planet.
Yeah.
So then, like, if they kind of like hinted at it throughout the whole film, people would be like, oh, okay, because like people know about like the Lost Ark or the Holy Grail, so they didn't have to do that much hinting of what it can do throughout the whole film.
I guess so, yeah.
But then, like, with aliens at the end, I think the shock for people was, like, there was no hint or any form of, like, inclination that aliens would be a part of it.
Roswell, New Mexico, at one point, like, Indiana says he was, even though it's not shown in the movie, he says he was woken up in the middle of the night, packed onto a bus with a bunch of other scientists by the US military and then taken to somewhere. I think it's been so long since I watched it, and I'll be honest, I didn't really think much of the movie. It's kind of hard to remember, but I feel like they did hint it slightly, but everyone, I guess people were expecting something religious or, folkloric or mythological, not aliens. And when we talk about production history in a moment, you'll see there's literally something I picked up on there, very much based on what you've just said. Okay, what about The Last Crusade? What are your thoughts on that movie?
I really enjoyed the film. I think that's my, out of the three, like the original three, I would say that that's my second favorite. I think the reason I enjoy it is because that you then get the father-son relationship with Sean Connery and also with Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And also pairing. You have that iconic scene where Indiana Jones meets Hitler and he takes his book on sign like this.
Yeah. That is quite a cool scene. Also the one where they're tied up as well in the castle in Austria and it's burning. That's iconic. When, the German femme fatale is like, that is... Oh, no, Austrian, sorry. She's like... She kisses Indiana's like, that is how we say goodbye in Austria. And then the Nazi comes along and just punches him in the face. He's like, this is how we say goodbye in Germany. It's good. It's iconic. It felt like Temple of Doom was a bit of a dip. Personally, it's not one of my favorites. And again, we'll talk about this in the production history. It felt very different, odd, unusual, like didn't really fit with Raiders of the Lost Ark. Whilst The Last Crusade went back to it, the Nazis were the bad guys again. A lot of stuff to do with being in a desert, etc. It felt like that it was back on form. I mean, it's difficult because I guess with these franchises, it's like hard to do something new because people are always expecting the sense of adventure, the exotic locations, which I guess you could, that could mean anything, but people somehow always approve of the movies with Nazis in and stuff. It's like people just want the same. It's strange. Very strange. And we'll come to like what critics' reviews were of all these movies and adaptations. Let's talk a little bit. Actually, whilst we're here, did you watch the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles?
My sister did, but I haven't watched them at all. Have you?
No. Well, can't say much more to that. Should have done more research. So let's talk about the production history. So George Lucas wrote the Tales of Indiana Smith, in 1973, but the project to make it into a movie was stalled, mainly probably because he was sorting out stuff with Star Wars, etc. So George Lucas was taking a holiday in Hawaii after the success of Star Wars in 1977, and he was hanging out with Steven Spielberg because a lot of these famous directors and stuff all kind of knew each other, like Martin Scorsese, etc. Spielberg said that he wanted to make/direct a James Bond movie, which you said earlier. Well done, extra bounty points to you. Lucas suggests that he directs Raiders of the Lost Ark, which he would be part of these Indiana Smith stories he developed. Spielberg calls it basically a James Bond without the hardware, essentially, with these Indiana Jones or Indiana Smith stories, and wants to change the name to Indiana Jones instead of Smith because it just sounds better. And we'll work out where they got that name from shortly. But Indiana Smith's like a bit plain. And essentially that's how it started through that. And George Lucas's brainchild, but Steven Spielberg directed it. So you had that sort of vibe, and that's how Raiders of the Lost Ark came about. Now, Temple of Doom was meant to be much darker, and a lot of people say due to Spielberg and Lucas's marriage difficulties at the time. They weren't married together, I guess that's implying, but just because that was going on in their lives, and perhaps that influenced them, who knows. And they did want to move away from the Nazis being the bad guys in it, so hence why Temple of Doom, and I didn't actually realize this time, is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh,
Actually,
I didn't know that either.
I've never have known that. I mean, it's been so long since I've seen it. But like a lot of the reviews of Temple of Doom it felt subterranean rather than exploring the great outdoors. Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's jumping onto like different German army trucks whilst driving through the desert. Whilst this, it's like, trying to roughly remember, it's in India, it's like an underground place. They have...
So it's more like centralized in a specific location, where Indiana Jones is very much like country, continent hopping, picking one clue here, then going to this location for another clue, battling the Nazis or the enemies in this location and that location. Then it's a race to the end to get to the final location to find whatever the relic is or the treasure is. But to your point, the Temple of Doom didn't really feel like that. Yeah. It felt more like
one place.
Yeah, because it felt more like, funny enough, like a James Bond movie where he's invaded like a enemy base.
Yeah.
And he's then stuck in the base for like the second half of the film.
And there's moments where he's in impending serious danger. Although that does seem to be the case in a lot of Indiana Jones movies, you know, like being trapped with the Ark of the Covenant, with all the Ark of the Covenant. Remember when they discover it, they find it, the Germans discover them and then hoist down and like lock them in.
With the snakes.
Yeah, with the snakes. It's like a horrible impending doom death. Again, Temple of Doom very similar, you know, like the Kalima, and he pulls out the guy's heart, like that almost happens in Indiana.
And then remember, they're in like that. They went into some kind of dungeon, and the spikes were just coming down.
Yeah, and apparently that is a thing that is very common with Steven Spielberg's movies of this time, having a room with that's slowly closing in. So, for example, in the first, I'm sorry, not Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. First Star Wars is garbage shoot. Yeah. He loves those sort of moments where, you know, the impending doom of someone, and particularly being crushed in a room. Oh, and then the scene in Temple of Doom with all the bugs, where they have to get to, before they get to the room with the spikes and the crushing. I really struggled with that. And then when they're having, I guess this is more of a different thing rather than a scary room, but when they're having that banquet with the Indian princes and stuff.
Yeah, the chimpanzee where the brains.
Yeah, scooping out the brain and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty like,
and then cutting open the snake, and then inside is more snakes.
Yeah. Oh, that was tough for me to watch as a kid. But essentially, that was the Temple of Doom thing. So now the alien issue. So oddly enough, by the way, we've skipped The Last Crusade just because this alien issue is, I've got to bring this up. So George Lucas was actually very keen to make a fourth Indiana Jones movie following after the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which were 1992 to 1993. So there's actually evidence that he actually started working on a fourth Indiana Jones movie in 1993, and officially the script was completed in March. But this is where it's a big issue because he was very keen, George Lucas was very keen to make it about aliens, which eventually he did. But Harrison Ford himself said he's very reluctant to make the Indiana Jones movies about aliens because no way am I being in Steven Spielberg movie like that. And you got to bear in mind that Spielberg had just done Independence Day in 1996, and said that also himself, just like Harrison Ford, that he didn't want to do any more alien movies except for 2005 War of the Worlds, lol. But there was a big gap between doing those. And then Lucas was like, okay, fine, I'll just focus on the Star Wars prequels instead. Interesting, though, that actually it was in the works to do that fourth movie with aliens so early, and then looks like he eventually got his way because, lo and behold, 2008, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, aliens.
Yeah.
And you can see, like, Harrison Ford himself and Steven Spielberg weren't happy about doing it as well, so
maybe that's kind of like why the film wasn't as good as it should have been. And I think also one thing people have said is like, especially with the prequels of Star Wars, is that when it comes to writing, George Lucas isn't the best. When it comes to like, if you want to have like in-depth dialogue and great speeches, that George Lucas isn't the best. But if you want innovative ideas and ideas that completely change everything, that he's amazing. Because then I remember going through the prequels again, and like some of the lines that Anakin says.
I hate sand. It's coarse and it gets everywhere. I know the dialogue in Star Wars movies is pretty. But it's almost become a meme in itself. The dialogue because of how bad it is. But you're right. I could see he is a great visionary, George Lucas. Like, Indiana Jones is his brainchild. Star Wars is his brainchild. Yeah. He has great vision, I will say that. But yeah, perhaps he shouldn't be writing scripts.
And also another thing, you know the guy who plays Magnum PI?
I don't know Magnum PI.
So Magnum PI is like this. It was a big like American TV show which also showed here. I think in the 70s and 80s. and basically about a guy based in Hawaii as well, who works as a PI, and basically it was a really big show. I think the actor's name is Tom Selleck, I believe.
Right.
He was supposed to originally play Indiana Jones, but then what happened was that I think he might have turned it down, or he might have turned it down, or George Lucas might have thought, oh, let me just use Harrison Ford because he's an actor that I know, and I know what style of acting he can do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key thing. And I think if you were to ask like Harrison Ford, does he prefer his Han Solo or Indiana Jones? It's 100% Indiana Jones.
Yeah, easily. It must have made his career, really.
Because I think actors can be in two boats. So either they're like, I'm now stuck with this character that I'm now being typecasted as for the rest of my whole career, or they're like, I love this character, like the four hobbits from Lord of the Rings. Like Elijah Wood really loves the fact that people are like, oh my days, Frodo. He loves it because it really built his career. It probably prevented him from getting into other roles, but that's what he enjoys. But at times, especially when like Harrison Ford is talking about Star Wars, it's as if at times he's not too interested in being Han Solo anymore. And I think he even writ off himself in the 2017 film so that he would be like, you know what, no more of being in Star Wars. And I think he might have writ himself off and been like, okay, I'll be in the film, but I have to...
I need to escape from it. Fair, I guess they're the typecasting. But I mean, it seemed like I've seen him in a lot of other stuff, like K-19, The Widowmaker,
Blade Runner is
Blade Runner, yeah. I guess he was like the kind of guy, like a lead man role to go to. But I do know there's an issue of typecasting in Hollywood and just being stuck in these series. Like it's happened to a lot of people, and it affects them outside of work big time as well because they can't move on to other projects. Still though, interesting. He's a cool actor, Harrison Ford. I remember that he used to be like a carpenter, and how he actually came to know Steven Spielberg is I think he was making chairs for him or something like that, and that's how they sort of got connected. So perhaps it's like really not what you know, but who you know.
And it's weird because they were saying like actors used to have that as a side gig, so they would sometimes go to like acting schools, but like work in restaurants.
Yeah, big time, especially in Hollywood as well.
Classic example, Helen Mirren was an announcer at a circus.
Oh, really?
And then someone heard her announcing, was like, you know what, you should be an actress. Or like Johnny Depp before was like in a stationery store. That's where he was working before he became an actor.
Well, here's one actually. You know, in Temple of Doom, in it, what's the name of the actor? Because we've seen him in...
Yeah.
What's his name again?
We saw him in Loki season 2.
Loki season 2 and
also
Everything Everywhere All at Once. Everywhere. I could not get Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think I was too hungover when I watched it, but it was too much Everywhere All at Once. But what's his name? He's quite an iconic actor now. Here we go. Cast. That's it. Let's see if I can pronounce this right. Ke Huy Quan, or his anglicized name, Jonathan K. Kwan. My friend, I think he's from Hong Kong originally. My friend, oh no, sorry. God, that is so bad. He's actually Vietnamese. Okay. My bad. That was definitely something I got wrong there. But he was in Temple of Doom. How he got that role was his brother originally auditioned for the role. He came along with him, with his brother, his older brother, just to keep him company. Oh, no. His older brother was not doing good, and he stepped in during the audition, or just was giving him pointers, and the auditioning lead was like, well done, yeah, you should do it, and bingo. And that
launched his career, because then like after that he was in like the Goonies film as well, which was quite successful. Okay. And yeah, like imagine like your brother's going up for a role, and then you find out you're better than your brother. That on the way home, he must have been really ticked. The elder brother, like you should have just left him at home.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Could you imagine that you've been eclipsed, and like anytime you see him in a movie as well, you've just got that grinding resentment in you. Goodness me. And you hear that with a lot of actors. Some have just been discovered in the street. But the grind of being actors is so tough. Like, for example, Sylvester Stallone with Rocky Balboa, or the first Rocky movie, he was homeless, sleeping at bus stops at the point. He had to sell his pet dog. When he got his first paycheck back after doing the Rocky movie, first thing he did is he went and go and bought his dog back off the person he sold it to. Like, the grind is just nuts, honestly. Like, they often always have a side gig, like, you know, waiters, waitresses, but it's a very difficult career to get into. Anyway, coming back to Indiana Jones. Do you want to hear some trivia about Indiana Jones? Yeah. Okay. So Indiana was the name of George Lucas's dog at the time of writing the script for the first movie, so hence where he got the name for that from. The Smith, I don't know where he got that from, but it's probably like, I need a surname from, let's go with the most common one in the world, so...
Possibly off the, you know, like the James Bond angle, like Indiana Smith.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
And like, you know how James Bond is like, Bond isn't really like an outstanding name.
Yeah.
So maybe he's like, you know what, to have that James Bond vibe, let's him have Smith. And then Spielberg's like, well, it will sound better if it's Jones. And it really does. Yeah,
it sounds more adventurous, but I could see why, because, you know, James Bond, it's got like that English coolness to it. But yeah, for an adventure movie, I guess they needed something different, because as was it Spielberg described when he read the script of the first Indiana Jones movie as like James Bond, but without the gadgets and stuff. Although he's got a whip, you know, that's very iconic. That's definitely part of his thing. Always wearing a leather jacket, the hat as well. You know, he's got style. Interesting thing about Temple of Doom, it actually helped, it was one of two movies that helped create the PG-13 rating, as well as the Gremlins. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I did hear about that, and it was weird because the main issue would be is that if it's bumped up to a 12 or in America a 13, then it really like cuts the audience in half.
Yeah.
So I think like they probably had to like bargain with the whatever the regulator for films, like, no, we'll remove this, we'll remove that, and remove that. We'll minimize this to 30 seconds just to get it into a PG-13. Because it's like, now if you think about it, every major blockbuster is a PG-13 because they want it to be that, it's adults can watch it, but also children can watch it with their parents.
Isn't there sort of a thing now as well? Swearing is becoming more acceptable.
Yeah. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy, the third film, like, Peter Quill said, like, fuck in the film. And I was like, when I was watching, I was like, wait,
is anyone going to do anything about this?
There's 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds over there. Like, is it fine? Because like, that's the first time I've heard someone say the F word in a PG-13. Like, they first started off like with Shrek when he said arse in like in 2000.
I thought you could say, I've never heard Shrek say fuck, but
no, he said arse. Yeah. So you could see like in the early 2000s, like arse. Then it got like, went to then to bitch, then bastard. Then it went to like shit. So every time someone would mention it, and then it's progressed to like fuck. So all the way it's just progressed.
So you're saying it's Shrek's fault? You're going to pin this on Shrek. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You know, you can go to this Shrek experience in London for 30 quid. Me and some friends really want to go. I love Shrek, man. We need to do an episode on Shrek.
Yeah.
Hands down. But yeah, you can see why Temple of Doom sort of helped create this PG-13. I'll tell you sort of exactly the mechanisms of how that happened. But, you know, the scene, we've mentioned already, the scene in the movie, the ritual in that underground cave of like pulling out that guy's heart with that magic, like Kali Ma, and it's just literally, and then watching him get burnt to death in the
beating in his hands as well.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. And then, you know, there's plenty of movies where you can think about how have they scraped this bar as like, you know, a PG-13-12A. For example, Revenge of the Sith, watching Anakin get crispified, that's pretty gnarly. The Dark Knight, Two-Face, I know that was CGI, but that's pretty harsh. But I guess 12A is a very flexible thing as long as you don't show sexual things that go too far.
Or blood splatter.
But
funnily enough, the weird thing that they said that kind of bumps it along is that puts it really at a high rating is certain states in America is gambling. So if someone's
really? Okay.
if you actually show, so you know when you've got like the roulette machines, if you just see the wheel go round, it's fine. But if people put bets, then that could bump it up a bit. And like they also said, drug use is another one. So like if you see someone taking an illegal substance, that pushes it automatically to a 15, almost an 18.
Yeah.
So those
I
are
can
like
imagine that, yeah.
I think the two major things right now where, and another third one is discrimination. So like those three things are the things that mostly push films to an 18.
Push the age rating up. That's interesting. I guess now I was also weird because what was I watching? It wasn't Netflix, and they now have trigger warnings before at the start of episodes. So if one was like eating disorder, Cheers for the Crown is talking about there's an episode about Diana and showing her eating disorder, and it's interesting that they put that in now because I guess it's a good way of warning people because people with eating disorders. One of my ex-girlfriends had an eating disorder, and it's like when you have a friend who's going through one, it's very like difficult to sort of cope just as being that person that hears about it. So if you know it's going to come up in the TV show, it helps them like mentally prepare. And maybe like, this sort of cancel culture of things, shows that have been cancelled because they've done something inappropriate for a modern audience, isn't it? Maybe it's worth keeping those scenes in, but having at the beginning these trigger warning things.
Or even one thing I did see that I know that Amazon does, like when watching Jack Ryan, you would have episodes where they would say this is a 12, and then you would have like the intense violent episodes, or there's an episode in season 4 that I'm currently watching that you actually have kind of like a market where women are being sold, so they pushed it up to a 15.
And they had a trigger warning at the beginning. That's interesting. I guess it's a good way to approach it. I quite like how they've done this now because there's loads of material out there, loads of TV shows that perhaps at the time were maybe appropriate or borderline. There's some stuff I was like, how was that even okay back then? Like Little Britain, Come Fly With Me. I can't believe they got away with that stuff back then. No, certainly wouldn't now, that's for sure. Interesting. And so, how they got that PG-13 rating is literally that and the Gremlins, which I've never actually seen, to be honest. The head of the MPAA, which I've unhelpfully not opened up the abbreviation on. Basically, there's a public outrage after Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom came out and the Gremlins. People are like, this is not okay. Look what you're showing our kids. So he suggested PG-13, PG-14, etc. I mean, what would specifically be a PG-13, and then what would then be the point where it's PG-14, in your opinion?
I don't really see a point, because then both a child can still see it with their parents.
I know, that 1 year makes a difference, man.
Because like then the 13-year-old would just then need to get their parents to go with them. So, like, but to your point, like, what does the year really make that much of a difference? No. And like even like the PG-13, it didn't come over, because here we've got the 12A.
Yeah, I was thinking
that didn't really translate until later.
Right.
So you had films which were PG-13s that would come to the UK because we've got the BBFC, and they would be 12s.
Right,
so I think that's why America lost like their 12 rating, but we kept ours. But I think our 12 rating is now gone because we've now got the 12A, and most cinema studios are like, you know what? If we're going to put a 12, let's just make it a 12A and get a larger audience. There's no point of like having like one scene, bump it to a 12, and then make it harder for the rest of the audience to see. You might as well just put in more scenes and bump it up to a 15.
Dilute it down a little bit. That's what was funny about the Batman that came out, was it last year, the year before, Robert Pattinson? That was a 15.
Yeah.
Literally, I went to the cinema to go watch it with a friend, and they actually had printed off something that knocked together on Word saying, FYI, Batman is a 15. If we ask for your ID and you're under 15, we won't let you watch it. Because that clearly was a big issue, because Batman's always been at most a 12A, like the Dark Knight and stuff, even with Harvey Dent's chewed up face. It was still a 12A somehow, but I can't remember what made the Batman 15.
I think it's, the scene where, so basically the storylines can also bump things up as well. So, the woman who basically was being sold, women were actually being sold by the rich people, not the Penguin, Falcone's club. So that could have bumped up to a 15.
Right, okay.
Also, the fact you had someone blowing up, you had someone getting their head beaten in is another one. You then had like when the person had like what's it called again? The mice stuck around him.
I'm trying to remember the Batman. I need to rewatch it.
And then I think also, the scene where I think Batman goes inside or has like, the video clip where you see the scene and it pinpoints all those who took like the Wayne Foundation money that was supposed to help the orphanage and were in like Falcone's club. And you had the women there who were like in bikinis and all of that stuff. That could have bumped it up. And I think another thing I missed out on is like horror as well can bump it up to like a 15 as well.
Right, okay.
So especially when you had like one of the major scenes would have been like at the beginning where the previous, was it the mayor? Yeah, when the previous mayor dies and his death, I think that would also bump it up as well.
Okay, I need to rewatch the Batman. It's been I've only watched it the one time in cinema, but it was good. It was very dark, and I guess maybe they really delved into sort of the dark. If it's going to be dark, let's make it realistic. Let's show these things, and wow, a lot of kids must have been pissed off that day. That's for sure.
It kind of reminds me of the child who his mum was like, Fox, because it was the first Deadpool film was with Fox, 20th Century Fox, wrote into like the director, could you make a PG-13 version of Deadpool? And they were like, no, we're not going to spend hundreds of millions just to make it PG-13 so your son can watch it.
Also, I feel like that's something, because Deadpool always breaks the fourth wall and talks to the audience. They should have mentioned that in the movie. Like, that's something that's more material for them to work with. And again, this is something, again, going back to Temple of Doom. So Spielberg himself actually admitted he was unhappy with Temple of Doom retrospectively. So was the public, and it was just too dark. And he said, quote unquote, I wasn't happy with the second film at all. It was too dark, too subterranean, and much too horrific. Mm-hmm. I thought it out-poltergeist. I guess, because the magic in it maybe was a bit too much. There's not an ounce of my own personal feeling in Temple of Doom. So he personally wasn't happy. But the thing is, though, there's magic in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, they open the Ark of the Covenant and everyone gets fried.
But I think the thing with the Raiders of the Lost Ark is like there was only magic at the end. Like there wasn't like throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
But you do kind of have a point. But I think that's kind of different because you had like a cult leader who was ripping people's chests out using magic. But then the Ark of the Covenant,
it was just a box. It was an object.
Yeah.
Maybe, I guess. But, don't know, there's also, like, strong, like, Orientalist sort of themes. I think throughout the whole Indiana Jones movie, like, how it shows the East and stuff, like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, how it shows Egypt, the guy with the sword, that classic thing where Indiana Jones just shoots him. But definitely in Temple of Doom, like, the way it shows this society, it I don't know, it kind of is probably of the time, but I don't think it's really aged on. I'm sure a lot of Indian people don't like that kind of movie, but hey, it's not for me to comment on that. I'm not of that culture. Another bit of trivia, this is a silly one. In The Last Crusade, there's a scene where they're talking on a Zeppelin. Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, father and son, they're talking. This is in the scene that they're on a Zeppelin, talking while sat at a table. Little known fact that you wouldn't have known, the actors were too hot on set, so during that scene they both weren't wearing their trousers. You just couldn't see it because the table was in the way. Isn't that great? Very silly. Very, very silly. Okay, so let's go to some questions now. Oh, actually, no, we should talk about the video game.
Yeah.
Before we go to some questions. So, there's an upcoming Indiana Jones game coming out by Bethesda, of all things, which is fantastic. So we'll be talking about Fallout very soon. Developed in collaboration with Machine Games. few years after its initial announcement in 2021, we finally had a trailer for it 2 days ago, which I admit I watched maybe a couple seconds of, but I got distracted by something. Have you seen this trailer?
Yeah, I've seen the trailer. And
What are your thoughts?
Machine Games are the people who make Wolfenstein.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, and I think what people were saying is that, one, they do have like defeating Nazis vibe, especially with Wolfenstein, and also people were thinking, oh, if it's Machine Games, is it going to be first person or third person? And the way they answered it, like after the trailer, they did like a huge deep dive, is that when you're Indiana Jones, you will be in first person, but if you're doing like anything that's iconic-y Indiana Jones,
well, like jumping from a plane to a plane, yeah,
or like using your whip to hold on to like a Zeppelin, which he kind of does in the actual game trailer, then you see it in third person. So like when you have like those iconic scenes, it would be third person, but when you're actually like just doing normal combat, it's in first person.
Yeah, I did see the one scene I remember is he's from a plane wing. He's like going across whilst the two planes are flying next to each other, and he just runs from one wing to the other. And I was like, that's kind of it's very Indiana Jones because he does those action sequences. I guess that's another iconic thing about Indiana Jones. The action sequences are so cool. Like in Raiders of the Lost Ark when he jumps from one moving army truck to the other. But I mean, that's a bit much, isn't it? Like, where's the aerodynamics? I know it's a game and all, but...
And also to your point that you said, like, the Temple of Doom is actually a prequel, because I remember in the deep dive, they were saying, oh, this, I think it's called the Circle of Truth, that's what the game's called, is in between the Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Last Crusade. And I was thinking, where's the Temple of Doom? So now I understand that was a prequel. And I think the way that they want to work it is that there are multiple artifacts that Indiana Jones finds around the world that links to a major plot, which is the Circle of Truth that goes around the globe. So then he's traveling from place to place. So you did see him in I think it was Marshall University that he's the professor at. So he starts off there. You can definitely tell he goes to Egypt. It seems as if he goes to Central America, maybe to Mexico, because it did look like Aztec, maybe going to Peru for the Incas, maybe. And it was like he would travel all over the place, and also had the iconic villain as well. The
Nazis are in it as well. So always the Nazis. I know, and this is it, because it's like the Temple of Doom, they're like, we wanted to move away from the Nazis, but it seems like they always have to come back to the Nazis, because I haven't seen... what's the final movie that just came out?
Oh,
I've got it here. La 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 la. Dial of Destiny. I swear it starts off with the Nazis aren't the main villains in it, or like someone's a former Nazi in it, or something.
I believe so, because I remember watching the trailer. There were scenes in the 40s that you did see the Nazis there, and then you see like an old Harrison Ford as he is now. And one thing to pick on that I really did like was that they're actually using Harrison Ford's likeness for Indiana Jones. Because sometimes
is he voicing Indiana Jones?
No, he's not voicing him.
Oh, what?
But I think it's because if it's a young Indiana Jones, it might be hard.
Now.
And I think like sometimes when people do video games and they do it of like a character, sometimes it's like, you know what, we'll kind of make him look like the actor, but not actually fully. But I'm glad they've actually full on made him look exactly like Harrison Ford.
Yeah, I think that's important, because I guess this started off as a movie, so he is the icon behind it, but things where it was a comic book originally, I guess, because there's different variations and adaptations of that character, there's a bit more freedom there, but with this, they definitely got to do Harrison Ford.
And I think one thing that could help this game is that it's not a game for a film. So then, because you know, the issue with games that are for films is that you can just, if you want the storyline, just and it's the thing is like, if you want the storyline, just watch the film. Because the game basically just fills in creates plots between the different things. Like I remember playing some of like the Harry Potter games that EA would make for the films, and it's just like, oh, we're just adding fillers to the film.
EA is a filler in itself.
True. And then Activision did a game for the X-Men Origins of Wolverine, which followed the film, but very much was like, okay, we're going to add little fillers in between each of the scenes of the film, but now it's its own thing. so they can
Right.
actually fully develop a story that is a part of. I think they did say it's Indiana Jones canon, so it's a part of the universe.
What about
but
the,
they can tell it the way they want to.
What about the Spider-Man games? Just out of curiosity, like, is that does it necessarily follow the recent Spider-Man movies? Or
No. So
see, that's when
yeah.
these universes are best, really, when they don't stick. They just don't just stick to the movies. It's very rare that you get a good video game of a movie or TV show, unless they like delve into the wider universe within it. I felt. Is there anything else you could tell me about this game?
It's coming out this year, if I can remember correctly. I think it's coming out in fall this year, I think.
Oh, okay.
Which is really nice. And I think the one good thing about it is that it kind of feels like Disney as a whole realized that we shouldn't give our games to one developer, because if we do and we sign like a long contract, they then become complacent.
Yeah, and they don't make quality. They just...
Because like EA had the rights to Star Wars games for 10 years. But they only brought out things like the latter stages, and like Activision had the rights to all of Marvel video games, but didn't do a good job with it, because they were like, well, we've got a contract for 10 years that giving us Marvel games, so we can just do whatever we want.
Yeah,
but Disney are very much like, we're going to give a property to Ubisoft, because like there's a Star Wars Outcast game coming out on Ubisoft. You've got the Jedi Survivor series, which is on EA.
That's really
good.
And
I think the cleverness that they're doing is like, we give it to studios, and then if they do the game well, we'll give them another IP.
It's like capitalism, using the market to play it off, the competition.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it. Sometimes capitalism does work.
Yeah,
because don't quote me on that.
It gives good quality games instead of like giving it to one studio who's like, you know what, we've got 10 years, we have this powerful franchise, we're just going to bump out games slowly, bit by bit. And having like no real good thing from it. Because like
like Call of Duty and Battlefield games are just, because I guess it's been, well, at least with Call of Duty is alternating studios at one point. It was like Activision, then it was, I can't remember what the other one was called. But it was just the same thing. Yeah. And like I just stopped playing after a while, because I was like, there's nothing. They're not going out there, they're not experimenting, not doing anything new. And then Battlefield as well, it really went downhill.
Yeah.
I guess because that was EA all the time, or someone else.
Yeah, it was. And I think one of the things that's weird now is because Bethesda's been bought by Microsoft. So as we do talk about Fallout later, it's like, so now Microsoft technically are making an Indiana Jones game. And I remember that Microsoft at one time, linking back to Fallout, is that they were looking into trying to get into like the TV space and like movie space as well. Right. And then they've now been able to use like the studios they've bought to then get into that lane.
Yeah, what's it called? There's a streaming service that's got Halo on. Is that related
Paramount
to
Plus? Paramount Plus
has Microsoft got their fingers in that? Or?
Yeah. So basically what they've done is they went up to like Paramount and said, you can create this, we'll give you the IP, but you would then create this television for us based on Halo. And I think they've even said they are looking to try and develop a Gears of War TV series.
Really?
Yeah.
God, it's something new of this recent age, but everything is being adapted now. Like, there's any science fiction or fantasy book out there, they are pumping that crap out. Any games. I mean, I enjoyed Gears of War games, but I don't really feel like it needs to be made into a TV show or movie. Like, I'm like, okay, cool, I'll watch it. But wow, that's just like, I mean, I'm really glad they're doing this, but at the same time, it's like, it's okay, we've got a lot at the moment, you don't have to. Fair. No, money's money, innit? They can make it anywhere. Okay, some sort of final questions. So, why do you think the most recent adaptations of Indiana Jones movies have struggled?
I think one of the things that the reason they've struggled, I think, is also down to Star Wars as well, is that it's been too long.
Right.
And I think the issue with Star Wars, just to bring them up first, is that they waited too long. And like, when you wait too long, the major cast members are now either too old or sadly have passed away. Because like, if they had done, let's say, films focusing on the expanded universe of Star Wars, so episodes 7, 8, and 9, if they'd done them instead of if they'd done them 10 years earlier, so like finish the prequels, give a 2-year gap, and then we're going to bring in the episodes 7, 8, and 9, I think they would have been received a lot better.
Right.
Just because, one, the actors are younger, the actors are able to then do more in the films, and also you can have more of a continuation of a storyline. But then when the gap is so large, then the feats that they were able to do as younger actors, they can't then do when they're older actors.
Yeah, no.
And then
it's
you
all
then have
stunt
to
doubles and CGI.
Yeah, and then you have to then explain, like, why is there a huge gap? Why is Luke now in his 60s? When we last saw him, he was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, like explaining that gap. And I think
exactly.
the issue with Indiana Jones, like even with the Crystal Skull, was that Harrison Ford as an actor, and for it to be believable, couldn't do as much.
Yeah, and even I remember hearing movies like the most recent Rambo, or one of the most recent Rambo movies, like Sylvester Stallone's so old, and from using steroids when he was younger. There's a bit where he's mounting a machine gun, but he actually couldn't lift up his arms that high, so it was a stunt double a lot of the time. And this like CGIing people's faces to make them look, I really don't like it.
Yeah. And I think also, like for the fourth film, The Crystal Skull, I think the reason why it didn't do so well, the alien thing, and I think a lot of people don't actually know about the Crystal Skull. Like, I didn't know about the Crystal Skull until the film came out, and I actually did some research afterwards.
What do you mean, just crystal skulls in general and, like, the mythology around them?
Yeah. And I think, like, one of the things I did see around the same time came out was National Treasure film, you know, the one with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, that was good.
Like, the second film, they were looking for the City of Gold.
Right.
So I thought when in the fourth Indiana Jones film, when they had gone to Latin America and they were searching the ruins, I thought that the Crystal Skull would be then linked to the City of Gold. And then based
off...
but then when I saw it, it's like, oh, no, it's something separate. So maybe if they picked something from mythology that was people knew more about or were more involved in or
just
cared
wasn't
more
so
about.
out there and modern, I guess. Yeah. So again, there's so much to work with there. And, you know, you see, like, some shows or movies that I really like is when they, for example, like Marvel, although it's, you know, it's based on mythology, like this whole concept of Wakanda, and then in Central America with, what was the...
Namor.
Namor, and what was their culture called again?
Talocan.
Yeah, I really like that. They, you know, they're using the source to do that. I guess the alien thing is kind of cool, but it's just like feels too modern, you know. And I guess that's a step out of the boundaries of what Indiana Jones was doing.
And I think also the villain, like there was a pressing demand for like there's a pressing demand, like, and it was also like historically accurate that at the end of the war, like the Nazis were looking for anything they could utilize to defeat the Allies. And even, I think someone said they actually had, which Hydra is also based off, that they actually started to look into mysticisms and folklore to try and see if there's anything that could save the day and prevent them from being defeated by the Allies. And that's why, like, Marvel really picked up on that and was like, so the division that the Nazis developed was Hydra.
Yeah.
And that's how Hydra stems away from it. So you do see, like, in The Last Crusade and also in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that there is a pressing need for Indiana Jones to get this, because if they get it, they will win the war. But then with the Soviets, it's like, we all know the Cold War was like for 60, maybe 70 years. So then what was the pressing need for the Nazis to have the Soviets to have the Crystal Skull?
But then it goes to, because actually there's a bit of a link there, that the psychological investigations that the Soviets were doing as well as the Americans. And I remember reading this about with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And also you've heard it like the Men Who Stare at Goats as well, like governments trying to investigate, do human beings have psychic powers? Could we use them as weapons? And that, it's ridiculous that these things are actually true stories, but they tried them. You know, CIA did testing of like acid,
LSD
LSD, exactly, MK Ultra sort of stuff. So there is actually basis for that, historical basis for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, not just because of the crystals, but that the Soviets were looking into mind control techniques. Because I remember the bad guy in that, played by Kate Blanchett, was like we want them. We could use these skulls to make people think as we do. You know. So there was some basis, I think. But it just didn't feel so authentic. Something didn't feel right. I guess it's just not Nazi. It has to be Nazis.
And I think the issue that Hollywood just doesn't seem to be able to get away from is that instead of getting, I know Kate Blanchett is Australian, but she can put on like a really good British accent.
Yeah.
That you don't always have to have like a it's not stereotyping to have like a Russian to play a Russian bad guy. It's like if you have a British bad guy, if you give him and make him American, and it gives him a poor accent, it makes you then not want to watch the whole film.
Yeah, it's cringe, isn't it?
It is, and like even listening to the third season of Jack Ryan, like some of the people who have like Russian accents, like they're borderline, so like it kind of takes away from it. But I'm like, you could just find a Russian actor to play as a Soviet or a Russian villain instead of trying to get someone who's British or American to try and put on the accent that you can just see through straight away.
Well, yeah, I remember in my friends group after Indiana Jones and Kingdom of Crystal Skull, there's a scene where the bad guy in it, or bad woman in it, played by Kate Blanchett. Do you know when she meets the aliens and like tries to converse with them and like she's like, I want to know everything. And it's just like so cringily bad, the accent. I'm sure she's a great actress, but like just get a Russian person to do it. And like just me and my friends just were like parodying that so much after. I was like, I want to know who did a shit in the toilet. Yeah, no, there's a struggle. Do you think there's any future Indiana Jones movies that might come out? What do you think the future of the franchise is other than the video game?
I think, unfortunately, that's where I think Disney will see it, because what they tried to do in the fourth film, especially remember at the end where Indiana Jones' hat blows away and then Sheila Buff's character is about to pick it up and everyone thinks, oh, he'll be the new Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
like
true.
He picks up himself and says, not just yet. I think they were trying to see if they could get somebody else, but I just think that they can't. And if they try and like recast Harrison Ford and try and see if they can then do more films, I think people will just be like, no, Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. So I think the best thing for them to do is to either have books, have maybe an animated series, have maybe an animated movie, but nothing like a live action movie or a live action. Maybe if they do a prequels, potentially as a TV show, they could get away with it. But I don't see them doing another film, because I think the backlash from fans would just be too much. Yeah,
and it's even a thing that was going on at a time with like Temple of Doom and Kingdom of Crystal Skull. It's just like people want it to be Nazis and the loads of locations. It's too hard for them to do something new. And if they had to recast Harrison Ford or maybe even doing prequels, it just wouldn't too much of a toxic fan base. I agree with you there. I think Indiana Jones, leave it the video games, see how that goes, and then I think it's time to do something new. Any final remarks about Indiana Jones?
I would say that it kind of spurned like a whole genre. Like, you can't look at Lara Croft or the Uncharted games and not see Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it's like a cultural imprint, doesn't it? Yeah, the adventure, sort of the exoticism, like, of some of the locations. I'm just trying to think if there was anything before Indiana Jones about this whole, cool archaeologists.
I think, like, maybe something in the 40s or 50s, like, when you had, like, those budget films in black and white where people are going like adventures, but nothing like full-on mainstream.
What, like King Kong, maybe? Was that King Kong? Was the original King Kong like 40s, 50s?
I think, 40s.
Yeah, so maybe, like King Kong going to, the tropical island and the adventure, but, nothing seems to quite... It seems like, at least in my memory, Indiana Jones is like the starting point for that sort of, that era. Because, there's been so many movies since then that try and take on that sort of vibe.
Like we mentioned, like National Treasure is another good one. There was another one, a Netflix show, I believe, called Blood and Treasure as well, which was really trying to take that vibe of like going around the world to collect treasure, but there's another organization who's trying to get this treasure as well. So it has like kind of like spurned a whole new genre. And I think the fact that it's still the iconic and the lead in that genre as well shows like how much of a cult classic it is. And I think
and that soundtrack. Oh wow.
Yeah. I think it has to be definitely in the top 5 of movie soundtracks, the most knowledge, one that you hear and you can automatically recognize it.
I know, so iconic. That Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, like, goodness, yeah, they are. We need to do an episode where we discuss our best movie soundtracks, I think. Okay, well, that looks like that's all we have time for today, folks. We're gonna wish you a wonderful 2024 ahead of you. You'll be hearing more from us. We've got some more episodes coming up, such as the Fallout one. That's going to be good. You'll be hearing that very soon, probably because we're recording it immediately after this one. But you won't know that, or maybe you will. And again, you know, we're part of the Pick Up the Mic network. We're a big network with various different sections. So we've got the Pick Up the Controller section where we talk about video games. We've got the anime one. I'm not sure, we're not hosting that, but that's in the works. And also the wider the Pick Up the Mic stuff as well, which is about career development, achieving excellence, etc., etc. If you really like us, you know the deal, standard spiel. Click the notification button to hear when our next episodes are coming out. Give us a like, give us a follow, and you know, donate to us some ancient gold that you may have found, because you're also an archaeologist. That's all, folks. Have a lovely rest of your year and speak to you soon. Bye bye.
See you, folks.